Good morning, everyone. This is Jorge Ruiz coming to you from our office here in Miami. This is the first segment that we do for Ruiz Construction. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics with not only with Adam, but a couple other vendors and partners in this industry that we're in the medical industry, building, locating, and designing the medical field and specializing in dental, veterinary, and medical. And today we are here. We brought Adam Keene from ARC. Adam, how are you today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. I mean, this is the first one we do, so
yeah.
you know, whatever happens, happens. So we don't know what's going to happen, but again, Adam, tell them a little bit what you do.
So I do buyer and tenant specialized real estate, commercial real estate space specifically, and you know, it's interesting space that we're in because we're able to work as, I would categorize as consultants, even though we have specialties beyond that more narrowly. You're doing construction, I'm doing real estate, but then we feel like we're involved in so many areas of these transactions, working with these doctors for not just 1 minute or one moment in the beginning of things. We're with them for the duration of things and visiting back then years later to see how things are going. You know, seeing how the space was built out, seeing how their deal panned out. Is there any issues with the landlords as far as the original negotiations, and you know, just visiting back in. So I think, you know, it's interesting what we do and how we work. I think we're in a unique space as far as that's concerned. So what are your main markets? I mean, start by saying like,
well, so
what are the two biggest markets in Florida that we're experiencing growth in?
So, as everybody knows, Florida is growing tremendously. Miami is growing out of control.
Yep.
Issues with Miami is the space. We're having issues locating spaces.
Yeah.
We do find the spaces. As you know, the market's about what, $50, $60 base rent plus triple nets, and we're seeing triple nets as high as $20, $25.
$25.
In the triple net, which actually puts that doctor. Puts the doctor out of getting financed, and we're going through that.
I think the biggest variable that we're having to overcome right now is the base rate, is new construction. You know, that starts with something you're experiencing is the cost of land. I mean, the cost of land in the very, very beginning of things is what's going to determine the base rate that you're going to see once we get involved in things. And you know, it's kind of unique because we'll see 3 or 4 blocks over in a little bit of a less desirable corner of the street, $20 to $30 cheaper in base rate than we're seeing just around the corner for something that's new construction. You're not necessarily getting any more exposure to the marketplace. I mean, I think it's important to understand, like, are you more profitable out there in that new, you know, shiny plaza that just came to town? Or can you make as much money or see as many patients 3 or 4 blocks back? And what do those savings mean kind of in the long run? You know, that's one of the things that we look at, is that the economics of the deal from beginning to end, we look at things in terms of a 10-year span. We're negotiating mainly to try to save you $200,000 to $300,000 in concessions. And those are, you know, derived in several places. Your build out cost.
Correct.
Cost of construction's going up.
Yes.
You know, everybody wants 3,000, 4,000 square feet. They're not getting enough money to pay for it. We've got to make sure that, you know, from a lending standpoint, when they're getting a practice loan, that we're protecting that money by any means necessary. Everybody wants to overspend in the build out, in equipment, in all of those different things. It's important to make sure that we're getting as much out of the negotiations as possible, plus making sure they're making as much money as possible month in, month out for the next decade. So, you know, we're looking at all those different things, and when we work with a new group, whether it be a dentist, whether it be a veterinarian, you know, the first stop that we've got to make sure that they're talking to is the bank. You know, getting the money,
absolutely.
getting enough money.
Absolutely.
And the one thing I don't think is talked about enough from financing when they have that first visit is the rent allowance. The rent allowance, I would say, is probably the biggest hurdle that I have to overcome. It's that doctor that falls in love with a beautiful building. They don't care if it's $65, $75, $85 a square foot. I just have to have it. We've got to understand what square footage is going to fit in that box and how to make that deal work for underwriting. You know, great example. I've got one up in Del Rey right now, and she was, you know, 2 hours from signing an LOI. her first year rent on average monthly was going to be about $16,000. She had no
That's
idea.
crazy.
$16,000. She was going
Is
to
that a
commit to
startup?
a deal. No, it's the second location.
Second one.
Second location, but a new operator relatively, still a younger doctor, graduated I would say 6 years ago, so still very, very green in the process. She would have committed to something that never would have worked, so we had to put the brakes on that, get her over to a lender.
And how many square feet was that? How much?
2,800 square feet.
So 2,800 square feet, and how many operatories was she looking for?
8.
8. So 2,800 square feet, 8 operatory.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good number for 2,800 square feet. However, $16,000 is not what you look at it year one. Is what does that look like in year 5 and year 10?
That's exactly right. 3%, 3.5%. Every single year, your rates are going to go up roughly 3 to 4%, depending on what was negotiated. We're seeing a lot of landlords right now asking for 5. We're seeing 4 at a floor with CPI. CPI is relatively lower than it's been in the past, but during COVID, we saw CPI at 8, 8.5. I mean, I was getting calls from tenants that are saying we're seeing increases to the tune of 2,000 to 3,000 from what we were paying the year before. 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. I just saw something on the news. It was probably about 6 months ago, and it was a pet shop that was literally going out of business because the escalations they were seeing out of their lease were so bad that it was going to sink the business, and they weren't able to produce enough. But going back to Delray, this is interesting because this specific dentist is looking for 2,800 square feet, and I have worked with a dentist across the street that has 1,400 square feet, and they're doing just about $2 million in production. So 1,400 square feet.
How many operatories? 4 or 5?
They have 4.5, 4, 5.
5 operatories.
And they're only using 4 of them. So using those kind of data points, I went back to the dentist and I said, hey, listen, I think you're overextending yourself. I think your rent's too high. I don't think you need to have this large of a footprint in this market. And as we look around at the competition ratio relative to the amount of people that are in this area, I don't think that you need to have this much square footage. I don't think having a dentistry office this big will support this community the right way. I think you're going to have a lot of dead space, and you're going to be spending a ton in overhead. You're going to have empty operatories that are not being used, and I don't think that that's going to be a matter of scaling into that size. It's going to be a matter of just dead weight. And I'd like to see her take half of the space. And I think I'm seeing that, as we look across the state and we see areas more concentrated, it's very similar to what you're experiencing in Miami. Now, I don't have a lot of experience in Miami, but I do know that the offices are getting smaller. And you're also seeing that around the country. New York City, Chicago, you're seeing heavy metro areas where you can get away with 3 ops and still do $2.5, $3 million in production. And, I've got some dentists coming down here, relocating from New York. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be touring. This gentleman has 3 offices, 3 ops per office. He's selling them individually to startups and to new doctors. And the production ranges from $2 to $3.5 million. And, we've got to look at those metrics and say, does it make sense to go into a 3,000 square foot office? Does it make sense to overextend ourselves? And what are we really going to have? Because it's always the first conversation. When we talk with a new group, it's, I want 5,000 square foot. I want to be in the most expensive market. And then you look at the deal, and once we put the breakdown together and go over the economics, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's too expensive. It's too large. It's too much of a waste of space. And, 2 years from now, you're spending, $18,000, $19,000 in rent, and you're wondering why you can't afford more in life.
Correct.
And you're complaining about this, complaining about that, complaining about salaries. And then not only that, when you're coming to the office, you've got this large, massive office that's not full, it's not humming, it's not busy. And what does that start telling patients? What does that start telling people that are coming there, going through there? It's a ghost town. I go get a teeth whitening, go get something done. It feels like an absolute ghost town. Now, if you're good enough, you're going to buy into that doctor. You're going to keep those people coming back. They're going to love that they can get appointments pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, you're just not making the rate of return you want to be making out of that office. And this is a business. I mean, to be clear, just because you're a dentist, just because you're a veterinarian, does not mean that you're not a business person first. That you should not be crunching the numbers, studying the numbers, and understanding how to maximize your growth out of that location.
Yes, and that's a great point that Adam brought to the table here. we go through a lot while we're designing these office, and sometimes manufacturers are telling the equipment specialists that they want operatories that are 12 feet by 10 feet. And in this type of market where, again, you go back to Miami and you're getting $50 base rent, $60 base rent, you have to afford less. So if you afford less, that does not work with designing the type of office with the rent. So that's why we design office that are no larger than 11 by 8, which is more than enough for any type of size doctor. Again, we sit down with Adam, we sit down with the equipment specialist, so we can get out of 1,800 square feet like a 6 operatories. Like he said, you don't really need too much to have a big producing office, but you definitely do need a good size office. But most of all, you need a good rent. And rent, it's either going to make you or it's going to break you, or like Adam said, you're going to have less in life. Because as everybody knows, the rent increases every year, but so does everybody else's pay. So what happens is, what's going to happen in year 10 when that hygienist is getting paid more $50, $60 an hour. Now your rent is, like you said, $19,000. So what we do is we consult with Adam, we consult with the equipment specialist, and we try to make sure that the doctor is not outpricing herself, but not for today, but for the future.
I would say
overextending, I think it is, right?
Yourself,
so, I mean, it's a good point. The market here in Miami is like this, but believe it or not, the market in Orlando, you're seeing it. Tampa, you're seeing it. They're $40 base rent now. $40. Some of them are $15 triple net.
45 is really the new 30.
Like construction costs in Tampa, it's about $250 a square foot these days. Anywhere from $225 to $250 a square foot. You go Jacksonville. I hear people in Jacksonville they're $275, $300. So now you got to pay these high, leases, and what happens is, what's going to happen in year 10? What's going to happen in year 5? Adam, that's what worries me.
For me, I would say, in the very beginning, you get one bite at the apple. As a practicing dentist, as a practicing veterinarian, you maybe have 2 bites at the apple your entire career. When you're looking at higher build-out cost, a lot of that starts to come down to the facade. It starts to come down to what finishes they want in the location.
Right.
And the way I look at it is that whether you're buying a car, whether you're opening an office, everything seems to start on social media for people. You'll get a doctor that'll start looking at all these beautiful offices. They'll think it's easy. They'll want it. They want to make sure that they go in there and have the best of the best and the largest. They're listening to their friends. They're hearing about past associates that did this or did that. And they're not paying attention to the dynamics of where those locations are, where those people are practicing, and what those deals look like underneath the surface of things. And, I think it's important that, going back to the practice loan, protecting what's being given to you. It's very easy to overextend yourself, and a lot of people are there looking to give you money. You even have equipment folks that are now financing equipment beyond the practice loan. You have lenders that have variance as a part of the loan where they're going 15% higher than your practice loan. And you've got to keep in mind, you've got rent, you've got practice loan, you've got school payments, you have all of these things that need to really be compounded on top of one another to understand what the cost of doing this business is. And, if you've got we like to try to keep it under $10,000 specifically for the first couple of years, at least for you to scale up. But if you've got a $9,000 rent and a $5,000 practice loan and massive school loans and payments that you're paying, really your cost of doing business is north of $21,000 to $22,000. And if you're going into a marketplace at 65 to 70 a square foot, you're now looking at that jumping up to 28 to 30.
30,000.
Real estate is your second highest expense in the practice. You've got payroll, and then you have real estate.
Correct.
And once you start to take the ancillary items and break everything down and look at what your actual margin of profit is, I mean, you want to be making $2, $3, $4, $500,000, what, in your first 3 years, 4 years at least? The first year, you're gonna feel some pain. Second year, it's like riding a bicycle. You now know what you're doing and you're starting to make small, minor tweaks and changes. And then by year 3, it really is off to the races. And I break it down that way because we mostly work with startups,
Yeah,
right?
that's-
Like
that's
80
what we
to
do
90% of the people that we talk to are first-time business owners that don't understand what they're doing. They're in love with everything that they're seeing and hearing. And then we have to make sure that we keep them on track with what's actually realistic. So if the average doctor's getting, $700 to $900,000, that breaks down into a couple of buckets. You've got $500,000 to build out. You've got roughly about 200 in equipment, 100 in operating capital, and then you can kind of push the
You got the
envelope on some of
signage,
those numbers.
you got the
Yeah.
computers,
Yep.
which those things just, signage, computer, that could be up to anywhere $40,000 to $50,000.
Yep.
Just between those two. So, yeah, but you get up there real quick, and you definitely need that, you definitely need the $100,000 working capital.
Well,
To make sure that, you make sure you guys survive, but also the doctor has to work 2 days out of the week at another facility for the first year.
Just quick
But,
math. Quick math. I want to break down 2,000 square feet, 225. Let's say 225 is the state average, right? We'll look at things as far as a state average.
Right.
We're getting build outs done cheaper south, and they get more expensive as you go north.
Yes, correct.
Depending if you want to piecemeal your build out together, you want to go design build, do you want to, work with a group that's out of state that doesn't really understand the specific prices, that need to bring their own people in. There's a lot of different ways to inflate that cost. But 2,000 square foot office is a $630,000 build out. Banks only give you 500. Money's got to come from somewhere. Is it going to come from equipment? Is it going to come from your savings? Whose pocket is being taken from to satisfy where you've overextended yourself? And then that's where lease negotiations really start to come into play, because when we present you to the landlord in the very beginning, we're looking at this like a partnership. We're saying,
Right.
Mr. Landlord, here's our tenant. We've got a blue chip tenant. We have a tenant that's never going to go out of business. This person's going to be here for 50 to 75 years. And when they're ready to retire, they're going to simply sell the practice to another doctor. So for the landlord, it's important to understand that this is a single bite at the apple for them, and then a space they're never going to have to worry about again.
Right.
I mean, realistically. And we want to make sure we're getting as much concessions as possible out of the deal. We're getting as much TI out of the deal. TI being tenant improvement allowance. We will get the contributions to help build the practice that you're looking for from the landlord without interfering with the partners that we've brought in to help us with this process. Not taking out of the equipment reps pocket, not taking out anything from contracting, not taking anything out from your operating capital. I just had a similar situation in West Palm where the overextension happened, and then we ended up using the TI to close out the loan, only to go borrow more money to buy more equipment. And then now we're looking at 1.1, 1.2 all in for a startup, and these are new doctors. Just $7,000 door, $8,000 door.
Yeah.
Is that necessary?
No,
does
it's
that
not.
does
It's
that
not.
bring you more money? Lime wash walls throughout the whole
No.
does that make more money in the long run? And those are the things that we've got to try to talk through to them. Now, people are going to have the practice how they want. I mean, at the end of the day, you want what you want. It's up to us to kind of bring a dose of reality to them and say, hey, listen, does it make sense to try to equip another op or bring in a specialist and focus on equipping out the rest of the office? Or really is all of these, gold-plated countertops and all this stuff actually going to make you more money? Social media is one thing that we'd have to look in and see what the budget for social media is accounted for from a lender.
I think they do 6 to 8
Thousand?
Yeah.
Oh, see that? To me,
I think that's what they budget, because they're always talking about $25,000
Yeah.
is their budget. So
Yeah.
if you figure 6 months of that, it's probably less.
Yeah.
If you think about 6 months of that, it's at $25,000.
Mhm.
You're talking about what? You're spending $4,000. And I don't think $4,000 gets you far.
It's an interesting debate. I've seen this two different ways. You can either value the traffic. So if I wanted to be right next to a school, let's say I'm a pediatric dentist, there's a
Right.
brand new middle school, elementary school coming. I'm gonna really value the location of that practice way more than I would social media. The marketing aspect's gonna be a different direction. But if I can avoid a $65 to a $75 base rate and be 5 minutes away from Main Street and then use marketing to my advantage, you can now take an inferior location and make it the destination. And set yourself up to potentially purchase that building in the future because you've created enough production, you've created enough profitability out of that location, you've stayed lean in the beginning to make sure that you can maximize your profit potential in that practice. And you know,
and that's a good point, staying lean.
Yeah.
Which is I agree with you, because the more we're building these days, it seems like the doctors want to build more Taj Mahals, you know, and unfortunately they don't have Taj Mahals, money,
budgets
or money, but they rather put in, like I go with doctors and I go, why would you want to put a bigger break room and take out an operatory? Just so everybody knows, and you know it, an operatory, a good running office, not a great, a good running office will do $25,000 per month with that chair, which is $300,000 more per year. And they'd rather give more for the break room than putting an extra chair. You know, or like you said, why are you putting gold plated, whatever, the doorknobs, countertop, at the $7,000 doors? I don't understand that. It does not make you money. It's a look, and everybody's all about look these days. But what you got to look into is how much money you're going to bring in. No one's going to pay you extra because you have that door that's $7,000. I mean, I know you haven't seen. We've done some crazy things, and you know, like I did a Dr. Menendez down in Candle, and she did the countertops all lit up. It was about a $30,000 item, but at the end of the day, that was her third office. She's already proven herself one time, not only the first time, but the second time. And now she went ahead and she had the money. She bought a bank. We redesigned it, we built it, and she finally spent the money where, you know, what she wanted, because she made it kind of like a boutique office, and she does do a lot of the Latin singers, and you know, she specializes to a different kind of market. But that's when you reach, when you reach that goal that you know you're producing $4, $5, $6 million out of your two office and your third office. But yeah, you know, it's a good point that you bring about how they want to spend money, even on the vets. When vets want to spend on the flooring, there's this the flooring that's I just finished doing an office that we did it for Denvest, and the doctor went ahead and asked us for the credit and for the flooring, and then they spend for half or a little 3/4 of the office, they spent roughly $45,000 on a specialty floor, which I don't think you'll make your money back. We had a doctor who did that a couple years back, and he regretted it. He regretted that, and he regretted some of the doors that he purchased, because the doors that he purchased a couple doors were $4,000. And now he looks at it and he goes, I shouldn't have spent the money. He's making money, he's successful, he's making money, but looking back, he's saying now he wouldn't have spent that money. That he probably would have saved it to probably either buy an existing office and remodel it, or use it for something else. But I mean, and I know you see that too a lot.
That brings me to an interesting thing to talk about. And the debate really is like understanding what market you're going into. You know, what's the cost difference between doing big glass doors versus standard dental practice, typical door, window? And what is the increased cost, would you say, of doing a lot of the big glass doors versus something a little bit more traditional?
I just think the glass door brings a little more kind of like a different look, a specialty look, something more higher end, but without really breaking the budget, you know? Because if you guys look at it, so you understand, anytime we put drywall on the wall, and we put the framing, and we do the finishing and everything, it's roughly about, each sheet, it's about $85 finished.
Got it.
Okay? Of that, so a sheet is roughly about 4 foot by 8 or 4 foot by 10. So you start looking at it, and there's really not too much of a difference.
Interesting.
But you get a better look.
Yeah.
Now, when you start doing all the office, then, you know, it gets a little more expensive. But at the end of the day, you're spending the money on something that's going to look without really getting the gold fixtures. You know, there's certain things. Now, you don't want to do the whole entire office because you're doing a startup, but you do some of those operatories that where, you put a glass, put a glass door, you'll still have a piece of drywall, so you could have your 12 o'clock and so forth, but you're still gonna make it look nice and slick and good looking as you're walking down, you have the LED lights, and that's a way where you can put into your business without breaking the bank. And like I always tell everybody, you wanna spend your money in the waiting room and the hallway. Once the patient's inside of the operatory, they're scared. They're not looking up, oh my God, do I have acoustic ceiling? Oh my God, they're just terrified, how much is it gonna hurt? And then they're terrified when they walk out, how much it hurts on the way out. How much they charge them and stuff. It's the same thing with the vets. In the vet, you want to, have a nice, good, happy area for the pets at the waiting room. Who cares? The pets don't know what's going on beyond that point, and most patients go back there without the parents. So and we just, again, I find it like hard to believe that they want to spend $7,000 for a door. You know what? Save the $7,000, spend it on the interior design, the finished design in the waiting room versus that $7,000 door, which who really knows what a door really costs? Do you really know what this door really costs?
Right.
You don't. You just know it's a door, it's made out of glass, whatever the case may be, but
So I think that comes full circle back to working with people like us who are specialized. Understand the difference between that, because the first thing that comes to mind as we kind of just talked about those couple of things is what kind of realtor are you working with? What kind of contractor are you working with, right? You can work with a listing agent that does a lot of listings in the area. You can work with a residential person, or you can work with somebody who is hyper-focused and specialized in that specific niche and understands the business at a much higher level. That way, we're gonna be able to consult with them, show them what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. You work with one of the listing agents out there that are out there leasing plazas and their names everywhere. You've got two things to overcome. That person is going to be working against you. That person has a fiduciary to landlords in the area. They're constantly trying to court them. And if they're bringing medical deals to the landlord, they're likely going to get some better opportunities and listings there in the future, which feeds their families for years to come. So when you think about who is representing you, you want to make sure that there's somebody there that does not provide a conflict of interest against who you're negotiating with. As far as a residential attorney or real estate agent, do they know the market? Zoning and planning and permitting and understanding the parking ratios, like those are very simple things to us, but very challenging to somebody who doesn't know the market that well. You could end up signing a lease and realizing that this is a space that you could have never gone into or can't go into, and then you're out of pocket $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 of some of your initial cost, if not more, and you've got to back out of the deal, and then you end up with someone like us anyway. The thing I really like that we do is that we surround ourselves with people that are proven to get things done and execute at a high level, produce at a high level, and produce something that meets the expectations of most of these tenants that we work with. Too many times there's a false expectation that's built into it, and it's up to us to really take them from the beginning to the end, introduce them to attorneys, introduce them to the right architects. We could probably have an entire episode about architects and the differences between a good one and a bad one, and how
we should actually bring Eric in.
100%.
And Eric, and do a segment with Eric, and which he could also intervene on what.
Listen, we've experienced this. There's an architect up in Orlando that I've worked with, and I won't mention any names, but we faced 3 to 4 months of unforeseen delays that were really unnecessary because we found out that this person was a draftsman, wasn't really a fully licensed architect that was running plans through an actual architect, and the savings, right, $4.50 a square foot versus market at about eight, working with someone that knows what they're doing, ended up costing them a tremendous amount of time. That's the difference between being in a situation where you're paying rent and still not open, and being open on time. So that's great. You saved $3, $4 a square foot, but it ended up costing you 2 times that because you're paying rent and still not open, and things still aren't done correctly, and you're still just frustrating, beating your head against a wall, which goes back to taking our direction and working with the people that we recommend, because if I negotiate 210 days to build out, 280 depending on what the market looks like in that area relative to permitting, and you don't go with some of the people that we know are able to get to the finish line and meet those deadlines, the entire thing starts to be in jeopardy.
Yeah,
and then you're paying a lot of money.
Actually, here at RCI, we actually we're turning down projects like that. We recently just had got drawings for a project. I got involved. I spoke with the architect. The architect literally, like, what they were doing was so bad that I told them everything that they were missing. They were missing, the medical gas. They were missing, and again, medical gas is the vacuum and the airlines are considered medical gas in our world. And I looked at it, spoke with them, gave them a number. It said the number was too much. Got them, went back to the bank. Hey, this is to make the office the right way. This is what you got to do. Otherwise, RCI will not do it. And lo and behold, he got approved for the extra, and he told the bank that he didn't want to spend the money. And so we turned down the job. We just turned down the job. It was going to be a change order job, and that's something that we do not. We don't want to be part of. Again, that that architect, if I would have seen those drawings, and we're looking at the drawings, if the drawings are not, if they're not what's needed to get that job started and finished within our time frame, and it's going to be a change order job, we're not doing it. We're turning it down. We've already turned down this year 6 projects. 6 projects because of bad. It's bad. That's why we're doing mostly. We're doing our own designs with Eric, and we're working, most of the time solely with Eric, just because we are a team. We manage it. You've seen us. There's a problem. We go ahead. We call Eric. He gets our plans done. Gets submitted the next day to us. We submit that to the building department, and we're moving forward. But you have guys like that are draftmen, don't know what they're doing. Then we're doing all the work for them, and then next thing you know, the doctors look at us like we're the problems, and it's not. It's the drawings, and then they'll turn around and say, well, the contractor doesn't know what they're doing, and after 32 years of doing this, I've learned that if the plans are no good, we just turn them down. And
the thing I'll also say about timing of these build outs, understanding permitting is so important.
Oh my God, that's
and a landlord doesn't understand the details of what we're doing and is just as naive as a tenant is for a first time. It's really up to us to mitigate that situation, educate both sides, and for them to really understand the value that each of them are providing. So if I'm in the middle of a negotiation with a dentist or with a veterinarian, and I'm looking at a landlord who is uneducated to what this build out actually is, and they look at thousands of deals a day or a year, and they're saying, oh, vet deal, dental deal, how's a dental deal different than a restaurant? I walk into a restaurant, everything's beautiful. They don't understand the utilities that come along with that and the investment to the space and what that's going to cost to build out and what that time takes. When we look around the Broward and Palm Beach County marketplace, there's a 3-road difference between 3 months permitting and a month and a half permitting or 6 months permitting. We can go 5 minutes south into Broward and be at a 6 to 7 month permitting timeline that is very normal. And most landlords aren't even aware of that because the permits it takes to deliver a medical space, they're not dealing with that stuff. Once they sign the lease, they're off and done away with things. And it's important to get these deadlines right. It's important to structure the deal on the LOI in the very, very beginning right to make sure that this thing goes off with no hiccups and no problems.
Now, going to the lease, are you seeing it better? I know we've asked before to pass about anywhere from 270, 300 days to allow for us to get the permit and do the build out.
I do 310 days on everything.
Are you? And I've seen that. But are you? Isn't it better to go to the landlord says and just tell them, hey, 90 days to get the plans into the building department, and once we get the permit, 150 days.
So that's the best way to do it. 150 days. So 150 days upon approval of permitting.
Right.
Once you get all that done, that gives you all the grace period. Now the pushback from the landlord's perspective is, how am I holding that person's feet to the fire to make sure that they're doing what they have to be doing? Right. They start thinking about the management of the project. Like, oh, if we're giving them this gray area, what's to stop them from using 6 to 8 months or dragging their feet or now once they're exposed to this gray area, who's holding them accountable to do the things that they need to be doing? That's the pushback from the landlord on that. And we typically lead with that every time, 150 to 190 days upon approval of permitting. Once we get pushback, that's when we start upping to 310. And normally when you put a timeline, it's like predictability. It's kind of one of those things where, we want things to be predictable as we go down that path. The landlord's looking at it the exact same way. 310 days max, that's my maximum risk exposure for having this property tied up. Even if it goes bust and the deal falls apart,
Right.
I know that my max exposure in risk is 310 days, whereas that gray area is the pushback. But I agree, it's the way it should be. But that's the pushback that I'm commonly seeing. And in most cases, we've got CIA, we're open way before 310
Yeah, yeah.
days, 250,
Yeah.
260.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's places like City of Miami, which
Yeah.
is a total mess.
Dumpster
It's
fire.
that's about 6 months.
Now-
5 to 6 months on any given day, which it's landlords down there, believe it or not, they
Yeah.
understand. So they give you
Yeah.
time and they work with you.
Yeah.
But there's other places that we can name a couple places around in the whole north as well. Good areas, believe it or not, are the West Coast.
Yeah.
The West Coast, for one reason or
I mean,
another,
it's taken
they're
off.
way better. I mean,
It's taken
they're
off.
Tampa's doing great. Everything north of Tampa, they don't take long. We did have one permit that took long, but it also had issues with landlord.
Now, what about Naples, Sarasota, Bradenton, those areas?
The thing is that we're using a lot of private providers.
That's what I was gonna
So
ask.
private providers been helping us out a lot.
Yeah,
But we're seeing a little bit of delay, like on fire.
Yeah.
Fire is overwhelmed,
Yeah.
especially in Naples
Yeah.
and Collier County. Let's just put it there. And Lee County, they're it's not. I don't think they're dragging their feet. I just think that they're overwhelmed. They weren't ready for
Do you
the
also
boom that's
think-
going up.
Do you also think, something way off subject, do you also think there's a old watch that is retiring and there's a new incoming employee that is taking longer to train, that is taking longer to be able to wrap their heads around the things that older individual that's 60, 70 years old that just wants to retire,
Yeah.
that knows things extremely well? Because if I'm looking at Palm Beach County and I'm looking at zoning and permitting and I'm looking at all these different areas, and you've got really, really good individuals working there that are looking at retirement, and you've got new people coming into the job market that is gonna take some time to wrap their heads around things, you dump all of that on them, like,
Yeah.
you're gonna see some delays, and it's important to understand who those people are and where those changes are happening. And a lot of the times it takes a matter of a couple of quick phone calls. If I was to call you and you would know much more about zoning and planning, and if I said, hey, listen, we're looking in Boca, what are some of the phone calls that you've had with zoning and planning? What are they saying as far as permitting, timeline, zoning? Is there anything new being proposed? Any overlays that are being talked about that are not made public, which are things that we face on a day-to-day basis?
Yes.